Now, yes, it's 10 o'clock in Lisbon and London, and I have to say good morning or good afternoon or good evening to every one of you, and welcome to the 13th Home Gemmology webinar, now with the support of CIBJO, the World Jewellery Confederation. And today we have a really special guest, Damien Cody, that we will address on opals and on opal classification and on how to value opals and a little bit of history. As you know, I'm very fond of history, per se. So going back to our webinar purpose, I'm going to introduce you Damien Cody. Damien Cody, he's a longtime friend. He's actually, I know him very well, and his brother, Andrew Cody. They are opal experts, and he's a very keen businessman, an opal lover, and really a supporter of not only the opal industry in Australia, but also the colored gemstone industry all around the world. He used to serve as vice president of the ICA, which is the International Colored Gemstone Association. And he's a really nice guy, really knowledgeable. And we are privileged to have him today sharing his vast knowledge on opal. So Damien, if you are in there, I hope in Melbourne, Australia, say hello, and the floor is yours.
Hey Rui, how are you? Thank you. Hello everybody. Looking forward to having a chat about my favorite gemstone, the opal, with all of you, and very happy to be part of this. Thanks for all those glowing words you used about me, Rui. I'll have to try and live up to all of that. I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got to say about opal as well. And then we'll do some Q&A at the end, so it'll be a lot of fun.
Very good. And make sure all the Q&A, now you have Damien on the room, so you can ask really technical and difficult questions, because he's like a living encyclopedia on opals, and it's a privilege to be with us today, so he can clarify so many issues around one of the most complex and fascinating gemstones on the planet. So I'm going, Damien, I'm going to say goodbye to you for some 15 minutes, then you will join in with your lovely presentation. And so folks, I'm going to now share my video and to mute and stop the video of Damien. So now it's only my ugly face and the lovely opals from now on. So what we will cover today, it's on the first part, I will cover what are opals, so it's more technical stuff, but not very hard. I will try not to make it really boring for you. And also discuss why do opals have play of color, because all those colors that are mysterious and that inspired so many artists, we will understand why did it happen and what's the science behind it. And also just a very short note on historical sources of opals, because it's when we are studying historical jewelry and we look at opals and precious opals, which are the ones with those colors, sometimes it's nice to know where they came from historically. And also because many of you, or I don't know if any one of you has he's so old as living from the 19th century, but it was common to say that opals were bad luck. So that's it. We were going to explain exactly why it started. And then Damien, he will do his presentation, and he will show some opal mining in Australia, present to you the new opal classification that is currently being discussed also within CIBJO, and the precious opal value factors that is really challenging to know exactly how opals are valued. We know that diamonds are valued by 4 factors, right? And he will tell us how it is done with precious opals. So let's continue. And so what are opals? Opal is a very complex term, okay? I know that there are a lot of scientists on the room, so this is more for them. Opal is like an amorphous or poorly crystallized material that has water, so is hydrated. Oh, sorry, I have to push this button, otherwise this won't work. Okay, we are back in track. And the the components of opal are micrometric, meaning that they are really small, micron, a tenth, 1/1000th of a millimeter, or even nanometer size. So they are really, really small grains or spherules of silica, of that material that we will see that composes that. And it can have some chemical impurities that sometimes gives a special color. Opal, for some people, they might find this strange, but IMA, which is the International Mineralogical Association, has approved since 1958. So when it was established, opal as a mineral. When I was in college, I was told that opal, because it didn't have crystal structure, was a mineraloid. But no, I mean, the IMA accepts it as a mineral, and it's a grandfathered mineral, which the composition is similar than quartz. So it's silica, SiO2, silicium and oxygen, and has a few molecules of water. And in average, it can have from 4 to 10% of water. In extreme cases, less than 1% and more than 20%. But so there is sometimes water in the opals. And the real scientists of opal, I show here a few of them, and curiously, all of them have hair, which is nice. And we have Emmanuel Fritsch, Jürgen Schellenrath, Louise Gaillou, and Benjamin Rondeau, and we have many more scientists that have published on opals. They refer to opals with that nomenclature that you see on your screen. And for people that work in the jewelry industry, with opal CT, opal A, opal AN, but this is the scientific terminology for opals, and everything has to do with the arrangement of the elements that constitute the opal. Sometimes they are amorphous, meaning that they are arranged in a random way, and sometimes they might be kind of crystallized with a certain organization. And in certain circumstances in nature, opal is quite disarranged, and then over time it starts to organize itself. And sometimes an amorphous opal, an opal A, can become an opal CT. But that's for scientists, not for us today. But this is to make sure that scientists, they refer to opal in a very different way than we do in the jewelry industry. This is the way they mention those opals, an opal AN and an opal A. Quite boring, right? We just name them fire opal on your left and black precious opal on your right. So that's the way we call things in the jewelry industry. And also we have the geologists, that they separate the opals from sedimentary deposits. Opal is always a secondary mineral because it forms only after the host has been formed. But sometimes it's related to sedimentary processes, and those sedimentary processes, they do constitute, and they fill those fluids full of silica, they fill those gaps in the rocks. And sometimes they fill holes like how do you say this in English? Vacuoles? Vacuoles. I only have the Portuguese word. It's the small hole that, like you see in, you know, Swiss cheese with those Emmental cheese with those holes. So rocks have those holes. And if those holes, those cheese holes, are filled with opal, we have opal nuts. But some people say that opal nuts is a totally different thing. Now we can see two opal nuts here. Myself next to Damien's brother, Andrew. He's definitely an opal nut, and I am too, so, but this is more a joke. Those are the nice, the true opal nuts. Quite rare. This is from the Smithsonian. And Damien just told me a while ago how to pronounce Wawa. I have no idea how to pronounce that word. So I will tell it as I know, Yowa, but I'm sure that he will pronounce for you later on. And this is a really rare opal nut. Sometimes you have the matrix, the ironstone, the rock, where little fissures are filled with opal, and then you have the choroid type of opal from Queensland, Australia. And you can also have not only sedimentary, like those Australian ones, but also volcanic type opals, like this really nice Ethiopian opal. And this, look at this rock. You look at it and that's nothing, that's just a rock. But it's actually a nodule where when you open it, it reveals the opal inside. The principle is similar to the one that brings those opal nuts together. So it's basically quite similar. And also, look, this is my favorite opal specimen of all time. This is from Mexico, and you can have precious opal and fire opal next together. It's crazy. And this is, if you want to visit this one, is in Paris, in a mineralogy museum of the L'École des Mines, the mining school of Paris. It's a fantastic museum. Eloise Gaillou, I know that you are in the room. Thank you for sending me a high resolution of this image. But ladies and gentlemen, when the first time I looked at this opal, I looked at it when it was like this. But when I saw it standing, the first image that came to my head was this one. So when this is like the funniest opal and the most interesting opal in the world. Eloise, I'm sorry if I put some eyes and some tongue, but when I look at the opal, I see a person, a very happy person. So I think nobody will look at this specimen again with the same eyes. But anyway, let's go further. And we also have opal curiosities. And this was found in 2013 in Zacatecas in Mexico. That is a kind of opal that is almost colorless if you light it with an incandescent bulb. Incandescent bulb are the very old types that we used to have in our grandparents' house, not anymore. But when you put it with indirect sunlight, it fluoresces really bright green. And because of that fluorescence is that name that you see on the screen, the uranyl. That is a very, very euphemistic way of saying uranium. And you are thinking, oh, uranium, radioactive. Yes, it's the same uranium, but those opals, the levels of radioactivity are really below the levels that make them allowed to be used. So it's totally safe to wear those opals. But those are really neat curiosities. And we also have fossils. So opal can be a fossilizing agent, and this is quite known in Australia. And also we have controversial fossils. This was circulated not that long ago on the internet saying, oh, those are opal pearls. Maybe that's not the case, but I mean, it's interesting to discuss. And you look at this and it's a pineapple pearl, opal, that you might think, oh, is that a pineapple fossil? I mean, it can, but it's not. It's one of the things that geologists call a pseudomorph, that if you know Greek, you know what this is. Pseudo is strange or similar, look-alike. Morph is shape. So it's something that looks like one thing and it is not. So this was a mineral called ekite that was totally taken over by opal. So there is no ekite on that shape, but the opal, that process, that epigenetic process, it's that geological process, kept the morphology of the mineral. So you have the same shape of the mineral, but a different composition. And this is quite interesting for geologists. I mean, we are, if you are a geologist or a mineralogy, maybe you are used to see what we call the common opals. Opals with no play of color. I mean, they are just rocks. But because it is known today that all those grains and silicate spherules that make that opal, if their size and their homogeneity is not good, if they are random, if they have irregular sizes, it doesn't have a play of color. Whereas to have this kind of play of color, which is quite rare, and that's what we love in opals, you need that all those components are like really small little spheres, all of the same size and all of a certain size that will be able to interact with light. And let us remember that white light is the whole colors of the rainbow. Isaac Newton, he knew that on the 17th century already. So all the colors of the rainbow, it's what we call white light. And if we see those colors, those white light as individual 7 or 10 colors, when those 7 or 10 colors, they enter into the opal and they have to go into those layers of spheres, they might be reflected back from the top of the layer, from the bottom of the layer. And it happens a physical phenomena that it's called interference. And so some of those colors, some of those wavelengths, they are valued, so they remain stronger, while others, they are just repressed they are killed, by the way, by that wavelength. So to have all those colors, and that's why when you move the opal, you keep seeing different colors, because all those angles make the interference of the rainbow colors quite different from one place to the other. This is not a simple phenomena. I could spend a whole day explaining to you in light interference, but this is what happens. I'm sure that you went to gas stations and you look at the floor in a rainy day and you see all those iridescent colors caused by the diesel over the water in the gas stations. That's the same phenomena. That's light interference. So it's basically the same. But to have light interference in opals, it's quite a rare geological thing. So only on very rare occasions is this happening actually in nature. That's why when you see opals like this, and you look at those opals, you don't see nothing equal, because to all those spheres, when they are packed together, they are never packed in the same way. So that's why you hardly have two equal opals. It's really hard to have two opals that are alike. You can get them with the tourmaline, with diamonds, with rubies, sapphires, but with opals, not at all. There is one situation where you might get some similarity between two opals, is when you have a certain layer of sediment, and you have here now I'm missing the English word. You have a gap that is filled with opal, and if you opened it on that layer, you might have what is called a boulder split. Now I'm really tired today. I'm keeping saying the wrong words in English, and this is what you might have. This is a boulder split, where it originated from an opal layer that was cut right in half, and then you can have two not equal but rather similar opals that are nice for earrings or for something. This is quite an amazing specimen. It was presented at the AGTA Spectrum Awards competition in 2015 by Robert Shapiro. It's amazing opals. A little bit of history. I'm going to rush up because you want to listen to Damien, not to myself. Jewelry historians, we are used to recognize that the so-called Hungarian opals are the most old precious opals on our trade. Sometimes it is mentioned that they have been available since Roman times, but actually scientists, they don't agree on if they were available or not on Roman times. They are more inclined to the fact that they were not actually involved during Roman times, but that's up to the jewelry historians, not to us. But we actually call them Hungarian opals, but they are actually in Slovakia, not in Hungary. And this has a reason, because in the Hungarian-Austrian Empire, Slovakia was on that territory. That's why it was kind of Hungarian in the 19th century and before. But when you hear Hungarian opals, they are not from Hungary, they are actually from Slovakia. On Roman times, there are some researchers that they suggest that whatever people were referring to opals are actually iris quartz, which is quartz, rock crystal, with some structures that cause light interference, like this one from Drama in Greece. And now a little bit of a myth and lore. Some of you have heard that opals might be bad luck, but that's something, a myth that doesn't come very old in history. It really comes only from the 19th century, from a novel from this gentleman called Sir Walter Scott, and the novel is called And the Gerstein, I don't know how to pronounce that word, and it apparently during the script, during the book, a certain lady has an opal brooch on her head, and if you interpret not so well the text, it gives you the idea that opals are really bad luck. But I mean, that is only for superstitious people, and I mean, I'm not superstitious because that's really bad luck to be superstitious. And of course, opal, because of the mystery and the changes of colors during play of color, attracted a lot of artists, particularly in the half of the 19th century in London for the arts and crafts movement, and later, of course, all the Art Nouveau artists, particularly René Lalique. And I'm going to share with you a few remarkable items by René Lalique, mostly with Australian opals, but not only. And those were from the Gulbenkian. Now this one is from the Albion Art Institute. And this is quite a remarkable one. Let's look at this only in a little bit more of detail. If you look at the opal, you almost see a darker area here and a much lighter over there, right? And if we turn the jewelry piece around, we understand that what is making the opal darker actually is matrix, is ironstone. So this is a bolder opal, almost certainly or very probably from Australia. And Damien, he can explain you all about bolder opals in a minute. Of course, opals also went very popular in the Art Deco movement a few years later, and today also in high-end jewelry you can see really highly priced opals. And make no mistake, when the opals are really great, and Damien will explain you what to look for in a fine opal, they are really very expensive. So, and this is the end for me, just really quick, opals are basically silica with a little bit of water, and when you have play of color is because you have extraordinary geological conditions that enabled all those spheres to be homogeneously stacked together on a certain fashion. And you can have opals related to sedimentary deposits and opals related to volcanic deposits. You can also have opals that are amorphous and opals that are poorly crystallized. And also, no two opals are alike, and this is really important because it's really hard to have two fine opals that are the same. And Hungarian opals are not from Hungary, they are actually from Slovakia. And if you want to see classical use of opals in jewelry, you must go a few years back to arts and crafts, Art Nouveau and Art Deco to see the fine use of opals. Because when the Australian opals started to appear commercially on the 19th century, that's when the opal boom started and influenced all the jewelry trade all around the world. And this is a quote from Richard T. Liddicoat. He used to be a president of GIA for so many years and editor of the Gems and Gemmology magazine. And he said that if we had a scale from 1 to 10 to grade and understand opals, this would be, diamond would be number 1, and opal would be number 10. And so, because opals are really complicated, I'm going to hand the floor to Damien so he can explain you everything about opal grading and how to understand Australian opals. So Damien, back to you. I'm going to turn on your video and your microphone so you can join us. I hope that you can hear us, of course, and there you are.
Hi, Rui.
Yeah,
I hope I'm coming through loud and clear. Hi, everybody. Looking forward to talking a little bit about opal. I'm going to be talking about something that's confused a lot of people, and that's how to value an opal. So we'll be spending a bit of time on that. But I'm going to start at the beginning with a bit of information about new opal classification. So let me get my... So the Gemmological Association of Australia and the Opal Association were tasked with the job of reviewing opal nomenclature. And in the process of 3 or 4 years now, there has been a body of work that's been tabled. It's now being given to CIBJO for ratification. But in essence, from the old nomenclature, there's a few things that have changed. One is that with the finding of Ethiopian opal deposits around the world, it became very clear that consumers needed to know about the hydrophane nature of opal. So there's a new classification for hydrophane opal. And also boulder opal has been split into a couple of different types. But let's get started. You can see down the bottom there, there's 8 different classifications. So look, how do you determine what kind of opal it is? Well, the first question you would ask is the opal natural, or has it been treated? Is it a synthetic or an imitation? So if you answer yes to any of those, 6 would be treated. Category 7 is composite, category 8 is synthetic. The next question you would ask is the natural opal absorbent or non-absorbent? So if the opal does absorb, then it would be category 5, natural hydrophane opal. The next question you'd ask is, does the natural impervious opal, that means it wasn't hydrophane, have a play of colour, or does it not have a play of colour? So if it doesn't have a play of colour, then it would be natural common opal. The next question you would ask is, does the natural impervious precious opal, does it sit on host rock or in host rock? So on host rock is what we would normally call boulder opal, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that later. And in host rock is where it's diffused through the matrix, and that we used to call boulder matrix opal. So if it's not attached with host rock, then it would then be natural precious opal if it has a play of colour. So they're the 8 categories of opal. And what we're going to look at today is mostly Australian opal, because that's my area of expertise, so Rui tells me. And we're going to be looking at how we can value the opals, what are the factors that we use in our business to assess the value of an opal. We're going to look at the black opal, obviously, light opal, boulder opal, which is boulder on host rock. You can see here in this slide, the second image there, you can see how the precious opal is sitting on a natural host of ironstone. And this is what we would call boulder matrix opal, or opal in host rock. And you can see there the veins of opal are diffused through the host rock, in this case ironstone and sandstone. And here's a group of opal boulder matrix opals, or opal in host rock. There's also some other things that come out of the Australian opal fields, and Australia is the only country in the world that produces fossils of animals, opalized fossils of animals. So this is a little theropod dinosaur bone in beautiful black opal. I'm not going to spend too much time on these. I just want to give you a little bit of a flavour about some of the incredible things that come out of the opal mines. This is a pliosaur rib bone, a little theropod toe bone, beautiful shells, gastropods and cockle shells. These are belemnites. They're a prehistoric squid from 110 million years ago, the Cretaceous period. And this animal obviously is now extinct, but this is the back carapace of the animal. As Rui pointed out before, this is a pseudomorph of an ancient mineral called icaite, and they're colloquially known as opal pineapples. These are very rare jawbones from one of the planet's earliest mammals. So once again, this is about 100 million years ago. This is a fossil called Calicodon, and the jawbone belongs in our collection. We have a museum of opal fossils and specimens. This is in our museum in the Cody Opal Museum in Sydney. This is an almost complete pliosaur, 2.5 meters long, and those bones are opalized. Quite incredible. Okay, so the Australian opal fields are shown here on this map. They're the small black dots in the lighter yellow coloured area. And that light coloured area is desert country now, but 65 million years ago, it was an inland sea called the Eromanga Sea. So the opal deposits occur around the edges and in the middle of this desert area of Australia. The red area is where we find boulder opal, or opal with host rock. Just going to give you a little bit of a flavour. It's obviously a very colourful stone, and the characters who mine it and who are involved in it are almost just as colourful as the beautiful opals. This is Lightning Ridge. They're never quite sure about the population. Estimates I think are about 3,000 or 4,000 now, but it fluctuates as opal deposits are found and gone. So opal mining is both underground and above ground. We're going to look at, just go back to the previous slide. This is actually Andrew Cody, my brother. This was his camp at Lightning Ridge when he had a mine. Andrew's in the room, I know. So, and for those who know Andrew, he's had a bit of a health battle and he's coming along just fine. So stay tuned. He'll be appearing at a show or a doorstep near you sometime very soon. So hi, Andrew. But this is Andrew's first opal camp at Lightning Ridge. And this is another camp at Lightning Ridge. And you can see the ingenuity. There was no ability to go to a hardware store or have a builder build your camp. So the windows here are made from beer bottles and a car door. So if you need a little bit of fresh air in your home, you just wind down the window on your car door. Quite incredible. Near Lightning Ridge is a place called Glengarry. It's about 100 k's from Lightning Ridge. It's an opal mining town, and there's no facilities there at all. So the local miners there built their own pub, and they called it the Hilton. So in the middle of nowhere, in the scrub, is the Glengarry Hilton. The heat in the desert areas of Australia in summer can be quite oppressive. Often, well over 40 degrees, sometimes heading up towards 50 degrees. So in some mining communities, they can actually live underground. Now, this is Cooperpedia, a very flat area. Once again, there's a lot of underground living that occurs there in old mine shafts. This is a form of mining. You can see it's a hoist. This was probably something from the 70s. And it's still being used today, these kind of hoists to get the opal from underground. This is a later edition. This was invented, somebody will probably correct me here, but I think invented around the 1990s. And this is a blower. So it's actually a big vacuum that sucks up the dirt from underground and takes it up the tube and into the back of a truck. There's obviously lots of open cut mining as well in certain parts of Australia. This is actually in Koroit, this mine. They use heavy equipment to get down to the opal level, and then they use a pick and shovel in the areas that are a little more delicate when they're on the opal dirt. Once again, this is Koroit. And that's actually the little guy on the left there is Johnny Usher, and I know he's in the room as well. So hi, Johnny. He's had some health battles as well. And what are we in search of? Well, this is beautiful black opal rough, and you can see in the image there a beautiful black opal nodule called a opal knobby. And from something like that, you know, you break a little bit off the edge and you reveal incredible gem color black opal. But precious black opal is very, very rare. Most of the material that comes out is grey or black or white material with absolutely no colour at all, called potch. And this is beautiful light opal rough. A beautiful boulder opal split. Often boulder opal can be split and you'll have two halves, as Rui pointed out earlier. And but sometimes you just have to follow the veins and grind down till you find a bar of colour. Okay, so we're going to start talking now about the value factors in opal. So what I've depicted here is some stones that are all calibrated in size, so there's no confusion there about value. And you can see the top left on your screen is very bright, and the bottom right of your screen is dull or has large patches of colourless areas in the stone. So here's a graduation from the top left across the screen to the right, then down the bottom again. So there's 6 different graduations in black opal quality there. Same here, these are all more greenish blue black opals, and you can see once again the different quality gradings. And if you look from the top left and compare it to the bottom right, you'll see very clearly that there's a big difference in terms of the quality of the stone. We're going to talk about the quality factors in a moment. I just wanted to give you a flavour here as to seeing the different qualities. Once again, this is more blue and green rather than green blue, and you can see top left is obviously very bright and bottom right is dull, and whilst it's blue, it's not terribly pretty. So there would be 6 different qualities there in black opal there. This is light opal. Many of you are familiar, obviously, with light opal, and you can see as we go through the gradings, top left is the most beautiful and colourful and most brilliant. And as we move to the right and then down onto the bottom row, you can see gradually the brilliance and the colour and the fire of the opal is leaving the stone. So once again, pretty obvious there, the different quality factors. And in boulder opal, similar kind of thing happening here from top left down to bottom right. So the first factor that we would look at is opal type. And as you know, and Rui pointed out quite a few of them, there's so many different types of opal from all of the different producing countries, all with different qualities and different values, obviously, because of supply and demand would be one thing, aesthetics would be another thing, durability would be another thing. So all of these factors come into play in terms of determining the value. So the first thing we would look at when we're determining the value of an opal is the opal type. And as I spoke about earlier, there are 8 different categories of opal. So obviously the opal type would fall into one of these categories. The next one is body tone. This is one that confuses a lot of people, but you can see on this screen here, and I've got a couple of other slides coming up, you can see we use a scale. It's a Munsell scale. So it's neutral tones N1 through to N9. So from pretty much black through to almost white and all the grey scales in between. So we ignore the play of colour that we see, and we look at the background body tone of the stone. So body tone can add richness to a stone, and so it can also add value to a stone. Okay, so here is some live stones that have been graded out reasonably well into body tone scale. So the top left are N1 scale stones, so the darkest stones, N2, N3, N4, N5, and then we start getting into the lighter colours, N6, 7, 8 to 9, which is often almost white milky colour. So they're the body tone scales. You can see very clearly there how the body tones, the grey scales, would line up with the background body tones. So it has nothing to do with the play of colour, all about the background body hue. We've developed, at Cody, we've developed master sets for Opal, and included in there is a Munsell scale, you can see in the middle there. And we have actual stones there, master stones, that align with the scale. So in terms of terminology, anything that's N1 to N4 is termed a black opal. A term that's not used very often, but it exists, it's in the black opal family, is dark opal. And that would be N5 to N6 on the scale. And then N7, 8 and 9 is light opal. Okay, so the third value factor that we use is looking at the dominant refracted colours now. So we're moving away from the background body tone, and we're looking at the colours that are coming through. And on this image here, you can see colours from blue, a little bit of green coming in, more green than blue, and a little bit of yellow coming into the top right there. And then we start getting into the yellows and the oranges and the reds. So the blue and the purple are less valuable colours in a stone than let's say red. Here's a particularly beautifully balanced stone with lots of red and orange, so highly valuable. Here's another one here with loads and loads of like a pigeon blood red. So they'd be very valuable stones. And we're going to talk about, I haven't spoken about the most important value factor of them all. That's coming up at number 8. So number 4 is transparency. Now in a black opal, transparency detracts from the stone a little bit, whereas an opaque stone will add value to the stone, all things being equal. So a dark opaque background will add value, and a large degree of transparency in a dark or black opal will hold the value back a little bit. Conversely, with light opal, it's the exact opposite. Generally, a clear, crisp, clean crystal or transparent stone with good colour, pound for pound, will be more valuable than an opaque stone. So the stone on the left here is opaque, the stone on the right is transparent. So it's a positive thing when we're talking about the lighter coloured stones, and the opposite in the darker stones. One that's often talked about is the pattern in an opal, and it's a phenomenal gemstone, the opal, with incredible phenomena, and one of them is pattern. So we're going to have a look at a few stones and a few different patterns. They're common terms that are used around the industry to describe patterns that occur from time to time. So one that you hear a lot about is harlequin. Now this is a close-up of a harlequin pattern, and you can see very distinct squares of colour, and that's what defines a very good harlequin. Squares and diamond shapes, very clearly defined, sometimes even with dark edges. You can see the edges on the color bars there, and often arranged in a very geometric pattern, which we call a harlequin pattern. So here's a nice little harlequin stone, some bright red patches there in the blue-green. Doesn't have to be exactly square, but squarish and very defined. The next one we're going to talk about is the peacock pattern. And here you have lines or like feathers of color. And within those feathers of color, you can have the color changing all the way up and down. They normally have lines fanning out like a feather would fan out. So this is a very beautiful peacock pattern. Here's another one that we cut into a shape of a butterfly wing, and you'll see this in a later slide as to how this stone finished up. But once again, it's a peacock pattern. You can see lines along the stone, and the pattern rolls and the color rolls along between those lines. This is what we call straw pattern. So you see lines like you would if there was straw or blades of grass in a stone. There can be any color of the rainbow, of course, but this is commonly known as a straw pattern. This pattern here is known as chaff pattern. It's normally quite small and quite uniform little patches, like you would if you chopped up the straw into chaff. This is one that's a little more common, and it's called Chinese writing. And amazingly, when we see this pattern occur, and if you show this to somebody who's familiar with the Chinese language and with the characters, very often there'll be a word that pops out from the stone in Chinese language. This is rolling flash, a bit like a cat's eye. So the color will roll across the stone like a cat's eye. Sometimes, very rarely, we have an asterism type pattern in a stone. This is a beautiful 3-point star. Sometimes you'll see 5 points, 6 points. Very, very rare. And this is a particularly beautiful one that we had radiating colors coming out from a center dot. The image was taken 25 years ago, so it's not terribly clear. But one of the most beautiful stones I've ever seen. So that's the star pattern. Ribbon pattern, they're like waves of color rolling up and down the stone, like you would imagine ribbons. Flagstone is a reasonably common pattern, and it's named after the paving with irregular shapes, like paving stones fitted together. Brushstroke is another one. This is a recent stone that we had, and it's as if the colour has been applied with a paintbrush. Just incredible. Broad flash is one where we have very large patches of a particular colour, and often with the broad flash stones, when you rotate the stone, the colour will change completely. And you might go right through the whole spectrum of colours, but in one big broad flash. And probably the most common occurrence is what we call pinfire pattern. Very small patches of colour, like dots on the stone, and that's probably the most common. Okay, moving to factor number 6. The thickness of the colour bar can play a huge part in the value of a stone. It's not the most important, but it's one of the important things we look at. And you can see in the top right-hand corner, you can see a very high colour bar there, and it enables us to fashion a beautiful cabochon out of the stone. This material at the back is the common opal. Common opal is potch. It's opal that doesn't have a play of colour, so it's not precious. But all precious opal really is associated with potch. So you don't find precious opal unless you're finding potch. And you can see on the left-hand side there's a piece of rough there that has, you can see the white clay, but then you'll see patches of blue and grey and then the precious opal. So the outside of the precious opal is potch opal. The second stone here on this page is a medium kind of cabochon. And once again, you can see the potch at the back, the grey potch. And the bottom one is very flat, so there's no cabochon and a very thin bar of colour. And at the back, you can see that the potch there is blue. So you can see different colour potch there. You can see black, grey, and blue potch there. But three different stones in terms of the thickness of the colour bar. The most desirable, of course, is a cabochon. So a high dome can produce that. Shape is another important thing when determining the value of a stone. The most desirable stones are generally nice cabochon ovals, but you know, obviously opal is a very valuable resource. So finding precious opal is very difficult, and miners and dealers will often try and maximise the amount of colour and not grind too much off. But clearly, in terms of value, the most valuable is a cabochon oval. But you can see on the left there that some shapes are desirable in the fact that something can be made of them. So here you have that stone on the bottom there, and it was designed and made into a butterfly wing. There's a finished piece there. Okay, here's another interesting one with shape. This is about 100 carats, 101 carats, I think it was. It was roughly polished, had a big hole in the middle of it with some sand, undulating shape, rough and kind of a funky shape. So yes, 101 carats. We recut it into 3 stones. And the weight went down to something just north of 30 carats. So from 100 down to 30. But the end result was 3 absolutely magnificent cabochon ovals with the most beautiful colour. And we did much better by having 3 beautifully shaped stones than having 1 awkward stone that was probably too big for jewellery anyway, and a very bad shape and with some problems right in the middle of the stone. So shape can be another important factor. Okay. So the most important thing in an opal is the brilliance. This is the amount of light return. Rui touched on it in his talk, with white light coming into a stone, and then the coloured light coming back out, being transmitted back out through the stone. So when the spheres of silica are small, they will produce purple and blue type colours. And as they get bigger, you go through the greens, the yellows, the oranges, and then the largest ones will produce spaces big enough for the red colour to be shown in the stone. So you have to remember that opal, the colour in an opal is not produced by mineral. It's not a mineral colour. Okay, it's refraction of white light that produces the incredible colours. And that can only be done with everything being beautifully arranged in terms of its structure. So a very, very fine opal will have an incredible structure, and you saw some images that Rui showed earlier about the structure in a opal that's showing beautiful play of colour. So brilliance is the most important thing by a long shot. If you don't have brilliance, you don't have value, really. You can have everything else happening, but if you don't have the brilliance, you don't have the value. So here is a scale, if you like, from AAA down to D. And AAA, once again, there's a lot of light return, beautiful refracted colors coming through. These are not necessarily red opals, but these are just very bright stones. And then down on the right, you'll see stones that are only giving a little bit of light return back to the viewer. And so they would be lower value stones. So here's a magnificent black opal. And I mean, this is in terms of the structure of the color play, the pleasing pattern, the fact that it has red in it. It was a nice shape, good cabochon, dark body tone. Pattern, well, it's not a harlequin pattern, but it's still a pleasing pattern on the large patches of colour. And this is, you know, maybe approaching something like perfection. Okay, so what can you use? How can you get help if you're having difficulty knowing how to value stones? Well, this is a Cody Opal master reference set, or a page from the master reference set. There are 9 pages, and there's only a few of these left, so they're really being designed for gem laboratories and educational institutions. But if you're very keen, then you know, you might want to avail yourself of the last few remaining sets. We're just still working on the Opal handbook. This will have all of this information and lots and lots of research, the latest research on Opal. We're still a few months away from finalising this. We've been working on it now for over 3 years. So I hope Andrew's been busy working on it at home during the COVID-19 thing. We'll wait and see, but yeah, we've had a team working on this. It's coming out, I hope, in the next few months. There's a handbook which you can get on our website as well. This is a 40-page guidebook, and it certainly does a lot of the value factors. It is covered in that in the guidebook. So we're basically finished now, guys. If you want any more information, you can go to our website, and Rui's going to provide some other sites that you can get good research and good information. They'll be available in the further reading. So that's about it from me in terms of my presentation. I'm going to hand back to Rui now, and he'll take over from here. And if you have any questions, fire away on the Q&A. I look forward to trying to answer them for you.
Thank you very much, Damien. It was a brilliant presentation on really a great insight from a business and expert point of view over opals. Particularly what I was most fascinated about was the classification, because it's quite a new approach into how to classify and how to name in the trade those opals that we use in our industry. And also, I mean, I did learn how to grade a diamond, the 4 C's, right? And when I was a student, I did find it really complicated. And still today, I'm not grading diamonds for years. Sometimes it's quite complicated. But imagine, it's only 4 characteristics, but opals, it's 8. And my first question, Damien, is, how, if you have 8 variables, factors, how can you tag one price? Because I have no idea if with opals, it's the same with really fine natural pearls, that they are so unique that the price is something that you cannot actually understand, like in a Rappaport kind of list, right? And how does it go with opals?
Rui, you raised a very good point. When you look at the 4 C's, 2 of them could apply to, or actually, so you've got cut, clarity, carat, and color. So we spoke about color. I didn't even include clarity, and I didn't include carat weight. But, you know, they could be 9 and 10 on the Opal list of factors, really. I didn't include them because they're kind of obvious. But this is how complicated Opal is. I'm not saying it's easy, but what we've done tonight is just tell you about the factors that you need to consider when you're looking at trying to evaluate an Opal. So no, there is no magic price chart or matrix. People have tried, but let me tell you, if I as an Opal buyer and dealer relied on some kind of a formula or matrix, I would not be talking to you today. I'd be mowing lawns somewhere. Yeah. So it's impossible really to put a number on it. But look, you know, the market determines value at the end of the day, and Opal is like a piece of art, and sometimes, you know, the perfect piece of art is, some people will love and others might not really appreciate. But yeah, exactly. There's 8 factors, and there's many more actually, but 8 important factors that we use.
Wow. So that's really, I would hope that would be clarifying, but it's for us that we are not experts on opals. It's still confusing, but you are right. Each opal is like a unique piece of art, and because beauty is on the eye of the beholder, different people will have different appreciations over one single opal. And that's really the point on our industry, is to create emotional impact. Damien, can you please click on the Q&A log so you can have a look on the questions, and while you look at the questions and at the chat log, I'm going just to make one announcement for the next webinar and some housekeeping things. We'll still have about 7 to 10 minutes for people to Q&A for our audience. So I will just spend a couple of minutes less making a few announcements. And if you go over some Q&A, and I'm sure that you can pick the easy ones and the difficult ones, while I do some screen sharing and announce whatever I need to announce. So everyone, okay. The next webinar will be on Tuesday, and it's as I said at the beginning, it will be like a virtual tour on the Museu Nacional de Arte Antiga, the Antique Art Museum, with Luisa Penalva, the curator of the jewelry collection. And we will discuss the Brazilian gemstones, colored gemstones, and their impact on 18th century jewelry that our museum has actually marvelous and one of the best, if not the best collection in the world of Portuguese 18th century jewelry. That's our proposition for the next webinar. And if you want to get the links to subscribe and to know exactly where you can find those, I would recommend that if you look at my social media, whether it is Facebook, which is under my name, or Instagram, not yet, I will post only on the afternoon, but is also under my name, or Portugal Gemas, it doesn't matter. Or on LinkedIn, I'm sorry, this is not my profile, but if you look on my profile, which is my name, and there is already a post and with links that you can click and you can choose your things. And one thing, I'm sure that Edward Johnson has already posted on the chat log a few links that might be interesting to you to further reading. And one of the further reading is actually this chart published by Gems and Gemmology not that long ago. It's freely available. So that's one of the links that you'll have at your disposal. So Damien, back to you. Sorry to have taken the precious time from you, and we only have about 6 to 7 minutes to go.
Okay, there's some great questions coming through. I haven't even been able to get to the bottom of the list, but we'll start up near the top. Andrea's asking, does opal need to be put in water every now and then? Well, it's a very good question. Good quality opal really just needs a normal environment. That it's at its happiest in a normal environment. So if you were, it doesn't need to be put with water. It'll stay perfectly stable and very happy. But often if you're putting opal in a shop showcase and they're very hot lights, some of them have lights internally, that's not very good for the opal because it will tend to heat up the air and dry out the environment. So all of a sudden you have an unnaturally dry environment. Some people have had problems putting opal in a bank vault or into a safe for a very long period. Bank vaults actually have dehumidifiers in them to keep the paper dry, the paper documents. Worst thing you can do with an opal is to put it into a bank vault with those dehumidifiers. It will actually suck whatever water is trapped within the stone, suck it out of the stone, it'll shrink and could crack. So that's not a good environment. But a normal, natural environment is fine. They're perfectly happy. In fact, you know, putting it in opal is not necessary at all. Putting it in water, I should say. In fact, you know, with hydrophane opal, for instance, it can destroy a hydrophane opal if you put it in water because it will absorb the water. It could lose color and maybe or maybe not come back, or it could expand the stone and it could have, you know, a fracture or two. So hydrophane opal is better not immersed in water. So no, there's no need to put it in water. Obviously, non-hydrophane opal is perfectly happy on its own, and it's happy in water as well. It's impervious, so you can't get anything into it or out of it. Another question here, what is the difference between natural and synthetic opal? Well, there's no really true synthetic opal because it will all have a degree of polymer in there to hold it together. So that makes it different from our natural. How do you tell the difference between natural and synthetic opal? Well, unfortunately, with the gemmological side of it, there are too many crossovers in terms of overlaps with the different tests. So you can't be sure with testing unless you send it off to a laboratory and they were able to conduct a FTIR or Raman spectroscopy. So in the trade, we normally rely on our vision and the feel. Obviously, some synthetic opal has lots of plastic or polymer, and it feels like plastic. It doesn't feel like opal. The weight will be different, and it could have a lizard skin or a snake skin type effect. You can see some of this on some of the websites Rui will be providing you. So that's just the difficulty. It will take knowledge and experience really, other than sending it off to a laboratory. What have we got here? How much hydrophane opal is there in Australia? Well, there's hydrophane opal. There are a few very small deposits that occasionally can produce hydrophane opal in Australia. It's not very common. In fact, it reacts very differently. The hydrophane opal in Australia, normally when you add water to a hydrophane opal, the color goes away. But with Australian hydrophane opal, when you add water, the color actually improves. And then as it dries out, it disappears. But it's quite rare within Australia. What is hydrophane opal? Hydrophane opal is opal that can absorb water. So the problem with testing is that, and a lot of the labs are having difficulty with this, is how do they conduct a test for hydrophane that's not destructive? And that's a problem. I mean, even if you were to put a drop of water on it, it could change the appearance of that stone where that drop goes in. But that's you know, a problem we have to face, I guess. So if it will absorb water, then it is technically a hydrophane opal.
Damien, sorry, we still have a couple of minutes. Maybe we will have time. Of course, it's up to you, but we still have time for a couple of questions. It's 15 minutes past the hour, so make sure you choose them wisely. And by the way, everyone, you are used to see the poll at the end of the quiz at the end of the show, but I really messed up, so I have no idea how to put it up again, because I had to edit one of those questions and now I'm unable to do it. So it's on me. So, but you will have Damien, which is much better than any quiz whatsoever. So go ahead, Damien, you still have time for a couple of questions.
Ian's asked, is the grading scale that you were discussing your own or used throughout the industry? Well, what I discussed today was what Andrew and myself and our team use internally to grade opal. But I think generally the industry would be using all those factors in determining value for stones. Is there a reason for the pattern and what creates it? That's a very good question. It's obviously to do with the refraction of light and the structure of the spheres of silica, but it is amazing that you can have these patterns reoccurring and such a diverse number of patterns. Where can we see opalized fossils? Well, you can see them in various places. The Enlightening Ridge, for instance, the Australian Opal Centre is taking shape. That's going to be a repository of lots of beautiful specimens and fossils. We have, the Cody Opal have 2 museums called the National Opal Collection in Sydney and Melbourne. The Australian Museum have a very good collection of opalized fossils, as do the Museum of South Australia in Adelaide. They're probably the best places to see it. What have we got here? What was the value of the opal shown on the perfection slide? Well, look, I don't really want to talk about value per carat with stones, because that's a whole different story. And it depends on, where you are in the chain. But look, it's fair to say that at a retail level, fine black opals are commanding, the very finest, are commanding 20,000 plus per carat. And, it can be a lot more than that per carat. So opals are right up there with the most valuable coloured gemstones, and even, the better quality diamonds. So
one question, if I may, Damien, can you tell us the story about the Galaxy opal?
The Galaxy opal was found in Junda, and it's, well, to my knowledge, it would be the best example of precious opal in a boulder opal format. It's now, I think it is in the Smithsonian, or no, the museum, Houston Museum, I think it is now. An incredible stone. It has a very colourful background about it disappeared for a little while, and there's a whole story attached, but I won't have time to discuss all of that now.
I'm going to try to share with that one, because I don't know if oh, here it is. There you go.
That's it, yeah. And it looks a little bit washed out there in that photo. I think I took that photo, so I'm to blame. But it was much richer body tone and very brilliant and incredible size.
It is a boulder opal, right? So it has.
It is a boulder opal. Yes, it has matrix on the back, ironstone matrix, and it was cut as a big specimen. So just a big, huge, beautiful face of colour.
Yeah, it is indeed. So Damien, it's up to you. If you still have time for one more question, I'm sure that our audience will be delighted. Otherwise, we just do the closing remarks. and because you will have another one in not very good hours for you because you are in Down Under. And by the way, what time is it now in Melbourne?
It's 8:20, and I would normally be on my 4th beer by now, so I haven't had a beer. And and later tonight, I'm doing in my time. It'll be 3 a.m. when I start.
That's so generous of you. And everyone, this is how generous we gem people are. This is only out of passion that we love sharing things. So thank you very much, Damien. So it's up to you if you still have time for one more question, or if we go into the closing remarks. Up to you.
May opals be tinted? This is Helena. May opals be tinted to obtain a specific color? Well, impervious, natural, precious opals won't take any color. They're impervious. Hydrophane opal can absorb, so they can be colored. So often you'll see incredible pink hues or purple or orange or whatever color of the rainbow you want as a body hue. That's because it will be dyed hydrophane opal. So the opal has to be absorbent to be able to take the dyes. So most Australian opal is non-absorbent, so it can't be dyed.
And by the way, on the course of that question, what about the painted ladies from Andamuka, those bolder opals from that used to be called the painted ladies many, many years ago?
Yeah, so they're big specimen opals that have little value because you generally don't cut gems out of them. And it's a very thin smear of color onto a very hard, like concrete rock. That's what the painted ladies are.
Okay, good.
Not the kind of painted ladies you were thinking about, Rui.
Oh, I'm sure. Absolutely. My mind is really pure. So, Damien, I just wanted to thank you so very much for having accepted this invitation to join us today, this morning, and sharing your vast experience on opals. And as I said, I was particularly fascinated about the new classification, about the 8 factors, and I'm really looking forward for the book because I have this one, which is my Opal Bible. It's a signed copy. I can sell for $10,000, but then you will sell me another one. And thank you very much. Looking forward for that book. It will be, I think it's going to be a really great addition to every library. And thank you, Damien. It was remarkable. I will be seeing you in a couple of hours if you wake up.
Okay, Rui. Thank you, Rui, and thank you everybody for tuning in. It's been a fantastic evening, and look forward to seeing you somewhere on the planet soon. Stay well.
Okay, thank you, Damien. Also, thank you everyone for being this morning with us. Thank you, Edward Johnson, for being in the back, taking care of all the controls to make sure that this goes well. And also thank you, CIBJO, for the support of having this webinar for all of you. And be well and keep safe and keep positive. The lockdown is almost being lifted gradually, so eventually all of this will be over in a couple of weeks, months, years for sure. Okay, bye-bye everyone. Sorry if we didn't reply to all your questions, but time is limited, and that's how it is. Thank you very much for being there. Thank you, Damien, for coming. Bye-bye.
Thank you.